This morning is from the book of Genesis, chapter 39, verse 1 to all the way to 23, 23. I'll go on. I was making a joke with Sam this morning and Naomi, and I said it's almost like a script from Hollywood. So bear with me on this one. But it's not. And in a world from the beginning of time that we can so often concentrate on this seed, it is also for us to look at where it ends in the cornerstone that we have. Joseph and Potiphar's wife. Now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt. Potiphar, an Egyptian who was one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him there. The Lord was with Joseph, so that he prospered, and he lived in the house of his Egyptian master. When his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord gave him success in everything he did, Joseph found favor in his eyes and became his attendant. Potiphar put him in charge of his household, and he entrusted to his care everything he owned. From the time he put him in charge of his household and of all that he owned, the Lord blessed the household of the Egyptian because of Joseph. The blessing of the Lord was on everything Potiphar had, both in his house and in the field. So Potiphar left everything he had in Joseph's care. With Joseph in charge, he did not concern himself with anything except the food he ate. Now Joseph was well built and handsome, and after a while his master's wife took notice of Joseph and said, "Come to bed with me." But he refused. "With me in charge," he told her, "my master does not concern himself with anything in the house. Everything he owns he has entrusted to my care. No one is greater in this house than I am. My master has withheld nothing from me except you, because you are his wife. How then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God?" And though she spoke to Joseph day after day, he refused to go to bed with her or even to be with her. One day he went into the house to attend to his duties, and none of the household servants was inside. She caught him by his cloak and said, "Come to bed with me." But he left his cloak in her hand and ran out of the house. When she saw that he had left his cloak in her hand and had run out of the house, she called her household servants. "Look," she said to them, "this Hebrew has been brought to us to make sport of us. He came in here to sleep with me, but I screamed. When he heard me scream for help, he left his cloak beside me and ran out of the house." She kept his cloak beside her until his master came home. Then she told him this story. "That Hebrew slave that you brought to us came to me to make sport of me. But as soon as I screamed for help, he left his cloak beside me and ran out of the house." When his master heard the story, his wife told him, saying, "This is how your slave treated me." He burned with anger. Joseph's master took him and put him in prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. But while Joseph was there in the prison, the Lord was with him. He showed him kindness and granted him favor in the eyes of the prison warder. So the warder put Joseph in charge of all those held in prison, and he was made responsible for all that was done there. The warder paid no attention to anything under Joseph's care, because the Lord was with Joseph and gave him success in whatever he did. This is the word of the Lord.
Thank you, Theo. We're continuing to look at Joseph, and we'll be doing that over the summer. It's great. It was something that came out of the children's work, so it's good that actually the children's work is leading us in what we're doing, and we're looking at the same things at the same time. So it's good to be doing that. And as we came to this particular passage, a few things struck me on first readings. That's what tends to happen. You know, I tend to look at it and you get first reading and then you think, what on earth am I going to do? You leave it for a while and then you go back for second reading and see what God might have been talking to you in the meantime. I'm afraid first reading, not that useful. The things that came to me were how much Mary dislikes being known as Sam Cheesman's wife. And Potiphar's wife, well, she had a name, I'm sure. She had passions and loves and foibles. Unfortunately, we only know this one thing about her. But there was more to her than this, I am sure. The second thing was, I think, a little bit to give thanks that the teenagers aren't here this week, because it would have been one of those with a number of sort of giggles and sniggers and what on earth is he going to say about that one. And the third one, even less useful, believe it or not, than those two, was the song about Potiphar was counting shekels at the time. But I promised Mark that we would not be singing songs in these services, so we'd better stick to that. But then, like I say, second reading. Okay, God, speak to me, please, because those things are not of huge use. And what we were looking at is how God works with and through Joseph during not one of his good times, but actually in one of his darkest times. So not when things are going really well for him, but actually what can we learn from this passage in terms of what Joseph does about what God does when things are really bad and when things are not going well, and in the darkness of that situation, what is going on there that we can learn from that. And I've got a couple of things that came to me. The first was to expect it and when to expect it. So we will talk a little bit about that. The second is that refrain that gets mentioned a couple of times. And I'm glad, actually, we went on to verse 23, because you get it 2 more times. The Lord was with Joseph. So what does that mean? The Lord was with Joseph, and what can we take from that? And the third is how Joseph found his way out of this time of darkness, and how actually that was linked to the same behaviors as what he would do during the times of light, and what he focused on there. So those are the 3 things I'm going to look at. And the first is to expect it. To expect times of darkness and difficulty. And that's not just because it is part of the human condition. It is, and that's part of who we are now and part of our world. And injustices happen. So this happens not of Joseph's fault. In fact, Joseph is seen as blameless in this. So it's not Joseph's fault that this happens. This happens to him. And it's not just circumstance. It's a specific act of injustice that he's having to deal with here that lands him up literally in prison, potentially to die. So we expect it to happen because it's part of the human condition, but we also expect it to happen because it's part of our calling as Christians. Now that one might be a little bit harder to grasp or to accept maybe. And I was, last week we were away, we were at the Keswick Convention, and one of the people I went to go and see is a Nigerian priest, and his book, his PhD, is about the growth of the church in Africa, and how he calls it thin, the thin growth of the church. And he said, because we're seeing all these figures coming out of particularly sub-Saharan African nations, of incredible booming of church attendance. And, you know, we give God praise for that, but what he was saying is the why and what is underneath it. And his fear is a lot of it is linked with, not all, but a lot of it is linked with this prosperity gospel that is being preached in a number of churches. And in short, that is that if you follow God, all of these bad and unjust and horrible things will not happen to you. And not only that, if you trust him enough, you will prosper physically, financially, in terms of your wealth, in terms of your life. It is all good from here. Don't you worry. It's only uphill. And of course, if your life is not that great and you look at others, you think, well, that's a God that I would like to follow. Of course, if you're in one of these dark times and you're promised only light from now on, of course that's something that you wish to follow. But what he's saying is that that is not what we're actually called to follow. If you remember, what we're called to follow is someone who died. It's the death of a number of things. It's persecution that we're told to look for and to almost take comfort in the fact that that is happening to us. Now that's not easy, but it is part of what we're called to do. It was said that it will look like foolishness to those who look upon it, but that actually persecution and death and things going badly is part of the Christian walk and something that we should not shy away from. So that's the first thing in terms of accepting that it will happen. And the second one I mentioned, timing. Now, it's no surprise to me that this passage starts off describing how well things are going for Joseph in his life and in his ministry. Because it is often when things are going well that temptation comes and the darkness comes with it. In our working group, in the group of people that I work with, we have something that we say to each other. One of my colleagues says it particularly. That's if something difficult happens whilst things are going quite well, they say, take it as a compliment. Take it as a compliment, because it means you're doing the right thing. And it means that something wants to stop this. Because if something is going well for the kingdom of heaven, well, that means it's going badly for evil. And evil doesn't like that and wants to stop that. And evil in our tradition in the Christian faith has a name. And one of those names is the tempter. And if I wanted to put an end to a movement of God, and God is using a person to do that, well, I would go after that person. And I think that happens. And it's why it's with great sadness that so often in the Christian life, and it seems to be so much at the moment, we're seeing humans with great ministries fall completely. But it shouldn't be a surprise. Because as things are going well, that is exactly the time when temptation comes and darkness comes around. So we should expect it, and we shouldn't be surprised by the timing of it in this passage. What could we do about it? Well, Joseph is able to say no. And that's brilliant. It's very strong of him. And I would say, particularly thinking about this passage and what I've just said about particularly men and leadership in the church at the moment, he's able to say no to that temptation. I wonder what it would be if it were us in that situation, because for each of us the temptation is different, isn't it? I wonder what it would look like to now, whilst not in that place in that time, consider what our no would look like. What would it need to be about? How would I need to go about it? And how could I avoid being in that situation in the first place? Because being able to say no to what is thrown at us when things are going well could help in terms of avoiding falling into that trap. But as I said, not all things are of our own doing, and this, ultimately, Joseph's no is not enough. He still finds himself in that dark and difficult place. So that's why the second thing is important. And the second thing is that refrain, as I mentioned, the Lord was with Joseph. The Lord was with him. And it was so important that it was repeated a number of times. That's good for us as the reader, isn't it? It's almost reassuring. If we were the first readers of that story, that was the first time that we'd heard it, we hadn't gone and seen Jason Donovan in the theatre, then we might have been quite concerned as to why on earth was this allowed to happen. But we're reassured by the writer. The Lord was with him throughout. Now, it's not just a refrain in this passage, is it? It's a refrain throughout the whole of God's relationship with those who serve him, with the nation of Israel before it and after it. It's true of his relationship with us now. I mean, just some of the verses. Isaiah 41, do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous hand. In Deuteronomy 31, I will never leave you or forsake you. Or Psalm 23, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will not fear evil because you are with me. Now that's a truth to hold on to. The problem is, if we find ourselves in the place that Joseph finds himself, or in whatever darkness it is that we find ourselves in due to an act of injustice, an act of ourselves, our mental health, whatever it is that gets us there, it can be hard to claim that truth sometimes, can't it? Someone might sign a card with one of those verses in it, and it might feel really lovely, but it's not that easy to hold on to when actually your head is in a very different place. Now, I'm glad and I'm heartened by the fact that that is normal. And that is normal of followers of Jesus Christ. That one that I used from Psalm 23. Well, the psalmists are perfect at this. They show us how we can do it. Because quite often there are psalms that start in fury and anger. Why has this happened to me? Why did you let it happen? They're not holding on to those promises said before them. They're saying, where are you, God? Literally, where are you, God? Why have you gone from here? They show anger to the point where they say things like, actually, I might kill somebody. That's how I want to feel. I'm going to kill somebody. That's how bad things are for me. So it's perfectly normal and understandable in the times of darkness. Even the strongest followers of God, a man that was said to be after God's own heart, still rages in the darkness. So it's okay to do that. But that's not where the psalmist, and that's not where Joseph stays in that place. What the psalmist does, and a number of you will know this anyway, is the psalmist then moves on to saying, God, where are you? To remembering where God once was. And saying, well, okay, I might not be able to see you now, but I do remember you were with me then. Being allowed to remember that he was with us then allows us to move on to a place of accepting he might be with us now. And that, in turn, allows us to open our eyes to see where he is at that point. So it's okay and perfectly natural to be cross and angry and to share those things with God. That is perfectly fine. But we can take that model of how to work through those things and think, well, actually, if I can't see him now, I can remember when he was with me. His promise says that that is true now, and therefore, I better look and I better see where he's moving. And that brings me to the third thing, which I said was that Joseph doesn't stay in that place, but is able to work out of it. And he does that by keeping his eyes fixed on God. He is able to identify where God is, and he follows him. Now, he does that in quite an interesting way. I'm not sure, I'll be frank, I would manage it the same as him. Because what he does is he finds himself in this situation, and we're not told about his feelings. So we can't presume he was just completely nonplussed about the whole thing. We are told about his actions. And what are his actions? Well, he goes back to doing what he knows. He goes back to doing what he's done and to doing what he believes God called him to do and to using the gifts that God gave him. In this circumstance, he goes back to service. He serves the people that are around him and loves them. And that's picked up by the people who look after him. So he goes back to service. He then goes back to using the gift that he's been given, because, as we all know the musical, what happens next? We have two people in the prison cell nearby. They have dreams, and then he interprets those dreams because that's the gift God has given him. That sets him before Pharaoh, and he interprets his dreams, and then through that, he becomes the second most powerful person in the known world at the time. But it starts with him still in that place of darkness, thinking, okay, what did God call me to do in the light? And therefore, that might be my path out. And it is. By focusing on what God called him to do, God provides a path out of this time of great difficulty. Paul, when writing to the Colossians, puts it in a slightly different way. He says, keep our eyes and minds set not on things above. So keep our mind set on things above, not on earthly things. That's not to dismiss the reality of the dark time and the dark situation. Because if that is being felt and if that is being experienced by somebody, that is real for them. And that is real for us when we find ourselves there. Those emotions, those things that I've explained, they're true, they're real. But there is something else in that situation that is true and is real, and that is what God calls us to do. So that's what Joseph uses as a way out. He goes back to his original calling. He goes back to place one, reliance on God. God, what have you called me to do? To serve people. What have you gifted me to do? To interpret dreams. Well, okay. Let's do that. And it is through that that he's able to come out. I don't want to pretend that difficult times are easy to get out of if we just follow these simple steps. Well, avoid it in the first place. Know that God is with you, and then just graft your way through it by doing what God has called you to do. That's not the case. Difficult times are experienced by all of us at different times, and they are called difficult times because they're difficult, they're hard, they're true, they're real, and they're experienced by us as such. But as I said, there is another truth in all of that, and that is God is with us. God is with us. Now, the worship group are going to come up, if you don't mind, and they're going to teach us a new song. So it'll be new to most of us, and we can stay seated as we listen to it and hear it and sing it. And as that's going on, in that place of worship, I think I'm going to encourage us to try something. I'm going to encourage us to practice or try and put in place some of what I've been talking about. What do I mean by that? Well, the psalmist, as I said, the way out for them in poor and seriously bad mental health because of the circumstances they find themselves in was to identify that God has been with them and to allow that to open their eyes to where God might be with them still. So I'm going to suggest that it might be that you're in one of those difficult and dark places at the moment. And if you are, and you would like prayer, then I'll ask those who are used to praying and practicing that to be at the back to be able to pray with you. Or it might be that you're not there, but it's part of our condition and Christian walk. So it's not a case of if, but maybe when we find ourselves in that place. Why not now? Think of a time when God was with you previously. Why not now do some of that work of giving thanks to God for being present in the difficult time in the past? Celebrate that. Give thanks to God so that when we do face these times, we can look for him and be assured of his presence. So Jonathan and the team are going to lead us in that song. Please do stay seated for this one and listen and learn the song, but also do some of that work. And if you would like to have someone pray for you, then there'll be somebody at the back to do that. Thank you, Jonathan.